Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Great to be with you on another glorious week in the state of Texas. All right, Aggies, do not get upset because I'm wearing my Texas Longhorn tie. It is sort of the first official week of college football season. Longhorns have their first home game. You might have heard about it against Ohio State, and I'm sure the Aggies have a big game too against UTSA, maybe. My son's current school. We'll see. We may talk some college football at the end. This show is not a sports show. We talk about the issues of faith, family, and freedom in the arenas of the courts, the legislature, and the media. But I do like to stay culturally relevant to what's going on outside of our sphere. But I'm a guy that cares about faith, family, and football. See how the F's work, the alliteration. All right, I'm just trying to soften it up a little bit. Some serious topics to talk about today, though, including the fact, not the usual backdrop. I'm in the Texas Capitol. We're broadcasting live from our state capitol in Austin, Texas, because historic votes are happening on the Texas House floor today, including a vote on the Texas Women's Privacy Act, Senate Bill 8, and then a very important pro-life bill, House Bill 7. So I want to be close to the actual one that starts at 1:30 when we finish up this show. But I didn't want to postpone this, change it in any way. I wanted to make sure that we had today's segment because we have a fantastic guest. As a matter of fact, he's a guest on the Texas Values Report for the first time. John Stonestreet is going to be our guest today. He is the president of the Colson Center. And, this is an organization founded by Chuck Colson, who we know passed away a few years ago. Tremendous Christian ministry, has a lot of connections here in Texas, but certainly a national organization. And John is a very accomplished voice in the culture of our Christian values throughout our country, as well as an accomplished author and really someone who is thought of very highly when we think about what's happening currently and how are we doing in America when it comes to issues of faith. And he and I've met a few times, but this is the first time to have him on. So John, welcome to the Texas Values Report.
Hey, listen, it's great to be on with you. I cannot speak intelligently on college football, and it's not college basketball season. That's my topic of expertise, but and I'm definitely not going to weigh into the Aggie Longhorn fight.
That's
so
right.
I'm going to stay clear of all that.
That's my alma mater, the University of Texas, but I've got family members who are also Aggies, and we find ways to get along. It's a fun time of year, but that means we're going to have to bring you back during college basketball season. We'll have you talk a little sports and how that fits into your life, learn more about your family. But I know there's important work that you've been doing. Our organizations have been able to connect from time to time. We were a sponsor, had a booth at a wonderful event that you guys had last year up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area last summer. And also one of our board members, our board chairman, Brian Russell, very involved with Summit Ministries, which I know that you have some history with, but you settled in quite well to this new position. Tell us a little bit about the Colson Center and some of the work that you are doing now. And I know we also want to spend some time talking about this new documentary and then this new project, Truth Rising.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. The Colson Center is one of the legacy organizations of Chuck Colson, who was one of the great evangelical leaders of the last generation, known for his work in the prisons, but he also really cared about having the church engage culture. And he thought that required being able to, as it says about the men of Issachar in the Old Testament, understand the times, to know what's happening in our culture. And the Truth Rising Project is an expression of that because we kind of live in a dizzying time. Culture is changing fast. Things that were unthinkable a generation ago have become unquestionable today. And of course, we also are dealing with, in recent years, kind of the vibe shift where people are kind of going, wait a minute, maybe we've gone too far into kind of wokeism and that sort of thing. Here's the good news. Christianity is not just personally helpful. It's not just meaningful. It's true. And what I mean is not true for you or true for me, but true with a capital T. It is the best explanation of reality that there is. And if we can learn to see the world through that lens, then we can have an incredible impact on the world around us. And I think we've seen some examples of that. We've seen some incredible voices of truth, and they're coming at just the right time in our vulnerable cultural moment that we're in. And Truth Rising, my friend Os Guinness calls it a civilizational moment, a critical point in Western culture that we find ourselves in. And the question is the question that Chuck Colson asked: how now shall we live? What's God asking of us in this time and place?
Well, and I know this is a project that you are teaming up with Truth Rising with our friends at Focus on the Family, as
Right.
I understand. And so, I have to just take a moment. We know last week, Dr. James Dobson passed away, someone who I can't speak to this in any intelligent way, but I would imagine he and Chuck Colson were friends and had good
They were.
interaction. And so, you think about people that have had such an impact on the work we do, but also an understanding how important it is not just to stand up for the truth about our Christian faith, about the gospel, but also to engage culture, to be out there publicly. You've got a great voice in a program called Breakpoint, I believe that you're a part of, been a part of for years. But Dr. Dobson is one of those voices, Chuck Colson as well. I've got books from both of them on my bookshelf from I don't know how many decades ago when I was a young undergrad student studying at the University of Texas and then going on into law school and thinking about how could I make an impact and how could I sort of live out the call of these
Right.
gentlemen, but Dr. Dobson, such a great legacy. Did y'all get to spend time together, you and Dr. Dobson, over the years?
Oh, he moved on from Focus on the Family a while ago, but he and I did not very much, not nearly as much as Chuck, but Chuck and I. But yeah, absolutely, Chuck and James Dobson were friends, and one of the things that this project Truth Rising fits into is this legacy of folks who really prophesied about kind of where the culture was headed. Starting with Francis Schaeffer, who was somebody who mentored both Chuck Colson and somebody who makes a strong appearance in the film, Oz Guinness. Oz is closest thing I know of to a Gandalf for our generation, kind of leading us and explaining what's happening in this moment. But these guys prophesied. They talked about, what were the historic Christian roots of Western culture that animated the Western world, gave birth to Western civilization, and made it the most dominant civilization in the history of the world, and how those roots had been cut off. Oz calls it a cut flower civilization, that the ideas that gave us life have now been cut off. And that means there's going to be a process of decay and decline. Now, of course, we know that from the history of civilizations. Civilizations come and go. Civilizations don't last forever. There are rules to civilizations. If you break those rules, you eventually decline and die. Well, that's no different for us today. And we've been breaking those rules for a long time. And of course, Francis Schaeffer wrote about that. Chuck Colson wrote about that. Jim Dobson talked about that, that these were, critical things that were happening in our moment and where that might lead. Well, listen, I think we can look around and go, they were right. We're at an incredibly vulnerable time. I mean, I remember when I first started talking about the philosophy of postmodernism. Okay, this is a long time ago. And we were talking about, relativism as an aspect of that worldview. And well, if your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, can I say that stop means go and, boy means girl? And we use that as a hypothetical. You're debating that today in the Texas
We're
House.
taking a vote on these critical issues. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone from it being a hypothetical to being a matter of public policy and at the level of sports and facilities, right? So this is what I mean when I say these guys were prophetic. And what the film Truth Rising attempts to do is to explain all that. It's kind of like a big map. You remember shopping malls where you had to find the store and you had to find that yellow arrow that says you are here? Truth Rising is a you are here. This is where we're at in the history of Western culture. And this is what it means for us as followers of Christ.
What I'm looking at here, some of the questions that will be discussed in this aspect, this program and this film that are so relevant. Jim Daly, I know, is a big part of this, who's been leading Focus on the Family for many years. Texas Values is the Family Policy Council for the state of Texas, which early on and for many years had its association with Focus on the Family, and now that's been transferred to our friends at Family Policy Alliance. But that role that we all have, and not just Family Policy Council organizations, but you mentioned the vote and the issues we're going to be talking about here at the Texas House. Texas Women's Privacy Bill is going to get a vote, Senate Bill 8, in about an hour or so after this show.
Wow.
And these are I learned this in law school. One of my professors, I don't know, someone I heard at some point say, the law is a teacher. So the law is not the solution to all our problems, but it does have a relevant and a significant role to play. And a lot of people, John, will base their decisions and their concept and definition of morality based on what the law says they can and cannot do. And so there is relevance and a significance and importance for what it says. And to your point, sometimes the law has to say, well, wait a minute, we didn't think those issues were in question. But now that people are suggesting they are, we want to make sure that's clear in law. You bring up the concept in the title or the phrase postmodernism, and I haven't heard that in a while. And I smile because I remember when, 30 years ago, when I was really digging into some of these issues, some of the authors and so on at the time, you did see that topic talked about. And it didn't necessarily have the word Christian in it, but it sort of suggested that. Just for a second, to those and maybe some younger viewers and listeners, when you say postmodernism, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, we maybe are going down a worldview rabbit hole right now, but really back in it's kind of an intellectual movement that became a cultural movement. It started with French philosophers, and then it expressed itself in Britney Spears, the Matrix movies, and Eminem, not the candy, the rapper. And that's the thing, is that these ideas have cultural expressions, and then they shape the way people think. So when you think about today, all right, here we are. We have one side that looks at gender, quote unquote, gender affirming care, basically telling young people that they were born into the wrong body, that they can actually become a member of the opposite sex through hormones and through surgical procedures and so on. One side looks at it and says, this is mutilation. The other side looks at it and says, this is how you save lives. We're looking at the same thing, and we're looking at it through completely different lenses. You're going to debate abortion regulations as well today, apparently, in Texas. One side looks at it and calls it murder. The other side looks at it and calls it women's reproductive health care. How is it that we can be a world that looks at the same thing and come up with completely different conclusions, right? This is the power of worldview. And the postmodern worldview basically says that there's no truth. There's no underlying truth. And the Western world was built on certain truths, absolutes. First of all, that there were absolutes morally, that certain things were right and certain things were wrong, and that those things are knowable, and that everyone should agree on those things. Not maybe to the detail, but that we all agree. The dignity of the human individual, that people are valuable in and of themselves, not just because they're a part of a particular tribe or a particular group or self-identify in some ways. All right. So these are things that gave life to the Western world. These are things that, as many people embrace more of a relativistic view of things, abandoned. And so now we have this disagreement at such a fundamental level. Well, listen, there's a reason when we talk about civilizations, we're usually reading history books or in museums looking at artifacts. It's because civilizations rise and they fall. That's the history of civilizations. And it's because they violate certain rules and they lose those things that hold them together. We've lost those things. We don't know we disagree on what up and down is. It's not like we all agree on where we're going to get to and we disagree on how to get there. We disagree on where we're going to get to. And this is an unsustainable thing. And it has to do with the abandonment of truth itself. There's a reason that Francis Schaeffer talks so much about the importance of truth, that Del Tackett with the Truth Project talked about the importance of truth, that Jim Dobson talked about truth, that Colson talked about truth. And that's what we're talking about here in Truth Rising, is that, or George Orwell put it this way: in an age of deception, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I believe that right now we are called to be that kind of revolutionary, willing to tell the truth, not willing to go along with lies, and that we're in a moment where to do so is a profound opportunity for the rise of the gospel in this time and place. And that's really what we want to see.
Well, I know, John, you've got quite a bit of training and background, including a deacon in the Anglican Church. People try to think about what is the source. They would, we would talk about this a lot in law school. Cite your source, right? And so, and so interesting. A lot of young people get that. They may make a strong argument, but also going, okay, I want to back that up, and they might want to have. And so you have to wonder, what are the sources these days, right? I mean, they might have been simple before. Maybe it was the Bible, maybe it was a dictionary, male, female. These issues were simple, but I think a lot of kids these days and young people are trying to figure out what the source that they're going to cite? Let's talk a little details though about Truth Rising. That would have been interesting. Would that have been the title of this
That's
project?
not,
It got a lot
yeah.
of attention. Truth Rising. Tell us when it starts. Next week is a little over a week away. People can start accessing it.
Yeah, the global streaming premieres is September the 5th, and you can go to truthrising.com to sign up, and you'll get access to the film. You'll get access to resources, including a 4-part follow-up study. You'll get access if you're a pastor and you want to show this film in church. We're going to be in Texas, by the way, September the 8th in Fort Worth at Birchman Baptist Church, and we're going to show it there.
Do you know somebody at Birchman Baptist? I mean, you don't know a guy named Vince Puente, do you?
Hey, man, that guy's a legend.
He's one of our board members. We were talking about you at our board meeting last week because I was mentioning to members of our board that you were going to be on the show. Great church over there. We've got close to 3,000 churches in our network here in Texas. You know, John, we did just a very short research a couple years ago, and some people, there's a report out there that says there's close to 30,000 churches in the state of Texas. I don't know what all those churches look like, but it's just wild what some of the numbers could be. Texas is a big state, a lot of other states that are big. Okay, the website is truthrising.com. We love this concept. Obviously, great friendships with Focus on the Family, and I've had great interaction with your folks at Colson Center. Where this is something that people, so say a church wants to get involved in, what are some of the steps they go through?
Yeah, just go to truthrising.com, sign up. That's going to give you access to all the resources, including there's a button there for pastors. You can click on that, and we'll help you host a watch party at the church. We have a lot of churches signed up to do that, and then that'll also give you access to again, the 4-part follow-up study. We know a lot of churches, including my own here in Colorado Springs, going to be using that as adult Sunday school. Other groups doing study groups. We have Colson Fellows all across the country. They're going to be hosting watch parties in their homes. So basically, these resources are designed to be flexible. You can watch them yourself. You can host them, show them to your family. There's a participant guide. There's a study guide. There's a leader's guide. All of that at truthrising.com.
So for a few of us that maybe remember some of these other projects before, like Truth Project, from Focus on the Family, anything that stands out to you that maybe is different or similar for people that are going, oh, that sounds familiar, is that something? What could you say about that?
Well, I mean, there's format differences that just reflect the times. And I think the big difference is those things were so prophetic, and they were really theoretical because they were making predictions. But the thing is, we're in the moment where those predictions have come true, where up does mean down, where boy can mean girl, and it shouldn't. And that's an unsustainable way forward, and that we have been called to this time and place. Listen, a fundamental assumption of this project is something that Paul says to the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers on Mars Hill, that God determines the exact times that we live and the boundaries of our dwelling place. So the Truth Rising film talks about the critical moment that we're in. And basically, that we have been called to this moment. We've been called to this. It's not an accident that we're in this moment and not in another one. It's not an accident that we're at the civilizational moment that we're in and not in the quote unquote good old days. So we've got to ask the question, what does that mean for being a dad? What does that mean for being a pastor? What does that mean for being a business leader? What does that mean for being a lawmaker? What does that mean? So that's one of the big differences. The other big difference, I think, and this is, I think, so inspiring, is that the film culminates in 5 stories of courage. People who in this incredibly contentious moment have been used by God in remarkable ways. And it's not because, I mean, they're all special people, but it's not because they're like somehow superhuman, right? Chloe Cole was someone deceived by this cultural moment. And she came to the truth about who she is and the truth about God. And now she's a courageous truth teller. Jack Phillips, the baker in Denver, willing to take a stand, not knowing that it would take up the next 13 years of his life, but how God has used his courage is absolutely remarkable. Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee refused to take a tweet down in the middle of cancel culture, where everyone else was bowing to cancel culture. He refused to do it, and how God used that is an incredible, incredible story. Katie Faust, just a pastor's wife, but has become one of the great advocates for children in our generation. And by the way, children are the victims of the bad ideas of our culture. And she's become a champion of that. And then Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who is, I think, one of the most incredible stories, public conversions of our lifetime, willing to tell the truth out loud, but also herself, her own life has been transformed by the truth. And each of those 5 stories tell us something different about what it means to be a truth teller, what it means to be courageous, what it means to live out our calling to this cultural moment, and what God can do if we're willing to do that.
Well, look, the powers of stories are just all around us. And so
Right.
it's exciting to see y'all put those things together. I've had the privilege of interviewing Katie Faust on our podcast at
Good.
NRB, National Religious Broadcasters Convention. Chloe Cole's going to be speaking at our event, Texas Faith Fest, at the end of September. That young lady is special, and what a journey she has been through.
Right.
And so I'm sure your viewers and listeners will appreciate that on Truth Rising. I want to mention this. I was at back to school night last night for my kids' school. I have one that's in college, 2 in high school, and I still go to the back to school nights.
Good for you. You should. Yeah.
Everybody should, right? And so now they know me by name, Mr. Saenz. But so, when I got back, though, I was talking to my daughter, and she tends to be a little bit more chatty sometimes about these things than my boys do. But nonetheless, we're having a conversation. It was just she and I. She wanted to know how it went with one of her teachers. And, she was talking about a dialogue they had about, when life begins, right? And my kids are in Catholic school. You can imagine, a lot of values that match up and some of the things we do. But I enjoyed how important it was for her to speak up about the issue, and then also to get that response from her teacher, and for her to feel like I knew the answer to the question. Why? Because she was grounded in that. I mean, and it's taken some time. Tell us about this program. Could this be something to offer, not just for, older gentlemen like you and I and parents, but what about kids?
Hey, speak for yourself, man. I'm a young guy. No. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be an incredible resource for parents and kids. And, listen, can you imagine our parents sitting down with us when we were, 16, 17 years old and saying, okay, I'm going to list out all the cultural challenges you're going to face and exactly how you can think about it. I mean, they couldn't have done it. There's no way to do it. So what you have to do is give them a great foundation so that they can think about these things. And one of the most important foundations is the one that apparently your daughter has. So that's so wonderful to hear, which is that these are not just matters of personal, private preference. When you talk about issues of when life begins, when you talk about issues about what's wrong with the world, and you talk about issues of whether God exists and so on. Yes, these are personally wrestled with questions, but they're not private things. These are public truths. C.S. Lewis was asked, what's the most important philosophical statement of all time? He said, in the beginning, God, because if that's true, the entire world is different. And a lot of Christians have fallen into this trap that because faith is personal, it's also private. No. That's a secular view that religion should stay in its own churches and its own houses and houses of worship. No. What we believe is that the biblical story of reality is true with a capital T, the best account of the world as it actually is. And that then can be the lens through which we understand these really difficult questions. And this is another way to ground people, I think, and especially high schoolers, in what is true. And then also what God is calling them to be and to do in such a cultural moment. It's not an accident that they're here. I don't know about you, but especially as a dad, I've got 3 girls, I sometimes wish they had been born in a different cultural moment, right? Like one that wasn't so hard on them as females. I don't know what moment was better. Maybe the good old days. I've read about them. They sound awesome, but God called them to this time in this place. And so, yeah, this is a great way to equip them for that.
That's like a Bluebell ice cream commercial. If you're familiar
Yeah,
with
that's
Bluebell
right.
ice cream,
They
run these.
days.
Yeah, that's like their tagline. So I could tell you spent some time in Texas, but you're absolutely right. I have 2 high school kids that are in high school. One son, I have an older son who's in college, and even me. Your kids are probably like this. They're around a lot of the stuff we work on, and
Right.
you think you probably expose them to a lot, or they're sort of ready. But I found myself wondering, is my son ready to go off in college? What's he going to experience and all that kind of stuff? And so you can imagine what it's like for a lot of other parents. So truthrising.com is the website. John, we've got an event coming up at the end of September. We'll talk with your people offline. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to get information about this event, maybe do a little clip or something to get people's interest and see how we can work together. Sounds like a great program and an opportunity, years down the road now. Truth Project was 10, 15 years ago, whenever it is. Now, this is sort of something new, but similar in a way to your point that is a connection relevant with the times. And I don't know if people can see the sticker that I'm wearing. We're using this as a messaging point today, and it just says don't erase women. That's
Yeah,
where we
that's
are
right.
these days. Women are feeling like they're going to be erased because these definitions are, the lines are being blurred, and the way that people are acting as if, there's not any real truth there between male and female. So truthrising.com is the website for the documentary. If people want to find out more information about Colson Center, John, what's the website for them to do that?
Yeah, you go to breakpoint.org. Breakpoint is our commentary. Of course, Chuck Colson started Breakpoint on Christian radio. Many people have heard it. And breakpoint.org is where you can find all of our resources. You can sign up for our podcast. You can sign up to learn more about the Colson Fellows program, some of our deeper dive educational programs on worldview and culture. And so, yeah, breakpoint.org.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. And I'm so glad that, we have so many different friends in common that see value in all the work, not only in our state, but across the country. And we're looking forward to seeing this launching of Truth Rising. John Stonestreet, thanks for being our guest today on the Texas Values Report.
Well, listen, thank you, and prayers for this important day there at the Texas House, that truth will rise even on these issues that are so critical for so many people. Thank you for having me on today.
Well said, and God bless. Okay, I have like a minute or two. How much? I got a minute or two left. I'm going to do a little wrap up and just to point to people what's happening on the Texas House. I mentioned it a couple of times. Senate Bill 8, the Texas Women's Privacy Act, is scheduled to have a vote. The numbers are there. Everything certainly looks like there will be a majority vote. The bill will pass. And if there aren't any changes, it'll go straight to Governor Abbott's desk. He's already made this a priority to pass, so we know that he will sign it. The question will be, will there be any amendments? We're hoping not. That way the bill goes straight to the governor's desk. But if that's the case, there's still time after that. But that's go to the Capitol or go online, post on social media, go to our website, go to our social media channels, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. Share some of our information. Hashtag don't erase women, protect women's privacy, Senate Bill 8, whatever you choose to do. A lot of good content you can choose from. This is over 8 years in the working. I'm going to have to do a separate show where I take you back into history and talk about all the different phases and stages we went to get to this point. But so many great leaders in the Texas House and the Senate and the governor's office that have been a part of making this day come about. The vote is supposed to start around 1:30 or so when the House goes on to the chamber and gavels in. Our team will be there. I'll be there to witness this history. We'll be reporting. Listen, the work is not done. We've been working overtime. Okay. This is a second special session. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been leading this effort. We really need your financial support. So if you can consider going to our website, txvalues.org, make a tax-deductible donation today. Listen, this is how we get the work done. This is how we have people that are doing this work every day. We have an office across the street from the state capitol and people that support us in all 254 counties, but we can't do it without you. Please make that tax-deductible donation today for faith, family, and freedom. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.